show.
G'day, guys.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Good.
Now, which one's Gareth?
This is me,
Which
bud.
one's Gareth?
Yeah.
Hey, Gareth.
Good.
Hey.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, and you?
Very good. Very good.
Cool stuff.
How's it going,
man.
Joe?
Craig, we
And
can't...
Craig?
there we go.
Craig's there. Okay, good.
There we are. We're all here.
I'm recording now.
You're on the you're on song there, Joe. I like it.
Yeah, I've done this before.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, once or twice, man.
Once or twice.
It's kind of weird, like chatting to you, because I almost feel like I know you just from watching all your shows. I'm like, yeah, cool. It's my buddy.
Yeah. People tend to be very friendly.
Yeah. I just love that show. It just left the biggest positive vibe in me. You know what I mean? Like you never hear.
Yeah, no, look, it's a film that we can talk about because not a lot of people have had a chance to see it. They don't know about it, you know.
What's up, Gareth?
How's it, Greg? Are you my man?
Yes, pretty awesome, man. How's your morning been? Have you done your usual morning ritual and done some awesome yoga? Got the body moving?
Yeah, but had such a good session this morning. I was up at 5, did my yoga from about like 5:30 or so, and
In the dark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's but it is getting lighter though. It is getting lighter earlier, which is cool.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, it was cool, and you know, in line with our chat with this week's guest Joe Cross, he was at a stage in his life where movement was tough and his health was a concern, and he was quite overweight. He was on a lot of medication to kind of keep him going, and he had tried different things. He had tried like 5 years of normal medication and then 5 years, I guess, of alternative medication and remedies, but those didn't actually work for him. And then he decided that, you know, there was only one other way that he was going to try, and that was going to do 60 days of juicing, which is incredible in itself. You know, just the mindset to actually start that out is quite crazy.
Yeah, totally. And he decided then also to film it. You know, that was the second crazy part of all that. He's like, I want to do this, and it's a big step, and I'm going to film the journey of doing it and document everything. On the one hand, to be held accountable to himself, but also there was a deeper meaning. He had been in the finance game for a long time and made a lot of money, but it just hadn't been fulfilling him anymore. And he realized that wasn't what it was all about. And the other undercurrent there was, you know, he wanted to actually live a more fulfilling life and start helping others. And so he thought by sharing his journey, he could actually just help many others, because so many people are in a similar situation. Hey, Gareth?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that was the catalyst, you know, to him helping others. And in his latest documentary, The Kids Menu, it really, really helps people, you know, like from a young age, instill really good habits into their life and educate them about food and where it comes from, and allowing them to form a relationship with food through actually growing it themselves, which has left a profound effect on them. You know, it's really warming to watch this documentary and seeing the hope that it creates, you know, in this day and age with all the fast food and junk food and obesity and everything that's out there.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, and he gives a lot of tools, practical advice to parents and to families and to kids. And I really love that aspect, because I just think at the end of the day, you know, sometimes we just want steps, you know, like how do we do this, and how do we start that ball rolling for a family towards a more healthful existence. So I think there's so much that we got into on this chat with Joe, and really interesting guy. So let's dive into this one and hear exactly what makes Joe Cross ridiculously human.
Cool stuff there. Hello, Joe Cross. How's it going, my man? Sunday night in Sydney. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Great to be with you, boys. Yeah, Sunday. I wouldn't say it's night yet, Gareth. It's pretty much summertime down here, and it's in the late afternoon. But by the time we finish, we might be into the early evening. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful day here in Sydney, Australia.
That's cool, man. And whereabouts in Sydney are you based?
Right now, I'm in Palm Beach, which is the most northern beach the most northern suburb, most northern beach of Sydney. So it's about an hour's drive on a good day to get down to see the Harbour Bridge or Opera House if I am so inclined.
Oh, nice.
Do you ever make it down there, or?
Do I ever what? Sorry.
Do you ever make it down there? Like, do you go down into?
I go down. I go down to the city probably 3-4 times a week. I go and train down there. I got a personal trainer I go to at sort of lunchtimes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I do other work down there. So yeah, I try to stay up the peninsula towards this neighbourhood as much as I can. But this is kind of a special time for me to be here. I'm usually in the US or travelling around, so it's just nice to have this little period of being able to spend some time in my home country.
That's
cool.
a beauty. So what does a typical day look like is this holiday, would we call it, or is this just a working holiday?
No. I think that I'm fortunate enough that, if I'm not making a film or I'm not giving a talk to an audience, or I'm not actually promoting a movie, then I can do whatever I do from anywhere in the world. I don't need to be in an office. We have an office, and the team that works with me are in New York, and so there's about six guys and girls in there. So they're all in New York City. But the last time I was in the office was November, so that's like 3-4 months. And I can roam around as long as I've got my laptop and my phone. I'm able to work from any location. Once again, if I'm shooting a movie or if I'm promoting, then I'm on a circuit, I'm on a tour. And if I'm giving speeches and talks to the rebooters around the world, which I love doing, and I do a lot of that, promoting a new book or whatever we're doing, then that's pretty hardcore, one town after the other, and flights or cars or trains or whatever it takes. And they're grueling, but they're great. I always say it's great to be in front of the audience. It's getting from one audience to the other audience that's the tough part.
Yeah, for sure. And is there a particular reason like why you've sort of chosen the States as your other like home country, or?
Yeah, look, I think that it came down to once my first film, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, once I decided to make that movie, and I decided that I would, because we can get into this later, but I decided to make my life change first. And the movie idea came very late in the piece. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to do a movie, and what will I do a movie about, and I'll do this. It was like, it would be a good idea maybe to put a camera on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So when you have that as a foundation and you want to share and tell a story, back in 2007, when I made Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, America, there was no Netflix. Back, it's not too long ago, YouTube was only 2 years old. So there was mostly people were getting their content via going to the movies or watching TV and cable TV and DVDs, right, from their home rental DVD store. So the problem with that is that that makes the market quite narrow to very specific genres. Yeah. And Americans were not necessarily big on watching content from other countries. So if you're going to tell a story and you've only got 20 million people in your own country, or a bit more now, but I think it's like 23, 24 million in Australia, and you've got 330 million in America, why not go to America to tell that story? Australians and South Africans and people from Great Britain, they're used to seeing content made in America. But America is not necessarily used to seeing content back then that wasn't made there. So the logic is that if I drive across the US and include Americans in this story, then they will be more inclined to watch it.
Very smart. So you can see, I guess, like there's a good commercial aspect around it. And
well, if you're going to go to the trouble of really, spending, it's very expensive. I mean, it's over $1 million to make a film. And if you're going to spend that kind of money and go and do that, you'll want to make sure that you get your money's worth by people seeing it, right?
Of course.
So that was the thinking. And luckily for me, that thinking turned out okay.
Yeah, for sure.
It's such a common thing these days for people to just have a camera with them wherever they go now, in one way or another. But just that, it's not that long ago, but you had to make a massive effort to go and do that, I guess.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, smartphones had only the very first Apple iPhone came out in July of 2007. And I started filming Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead in October. So, we're talking 2-3 months that the iPhone was out. And you can imagine the features back then for what you had in 2007 was very different to what you have now. So, and the camera that we used to shoot Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead was like those big broadcast cameras that was on the shoulder, huge, very heavy units. And so quite different to today. In fact, the latest movie which I made, The Kids Menu, we shot that on a Canon 300C, which is a very small compact camera that could be mistaken for just a normal camera that someone who's a camera enthusiast could have. It's a $20,000 camera, but still, it's the first camera we shot Fat Sick on was a $150,000 camera, and that was a rented one the cameraman brought along. But so the world's changed big time in those 10 years.
Yeah, it's those big cameras are. It's like, wow, these people must be famous, back in the day, because you couldn't miss them. Another thing made me think of I just saw an article this week, I think it was, that in Brisbane, the very last DVD or let's say or video store closed. I was still surprised that there was one, but that's a whole changing landscape in and of itself. Hey.
Big difference. I mean, in Australia, we still have DVD stores and we still sell a lot of DVDs. But certainly, the world is definitely changing. I don't know whether you could find any DVDs for sale in America. Maybe through Amazon you still can, but I haven't seen any in retail stores, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Maybe in like a few years they'll make a comeback, like records have. Like records are huge now.
Like the vinyls.
Yeah, the vinyls. Exactly. Yeah,
that is possible. Although I wouldn't want to stake a investment on that.
No, but definitely not. Yeah. So Joe, just to kind of give this chat a little bit of context, I actually used to be in investment banking, kind of like yourself in the financial industry, and about 2 years ago, one of my colleagues, he said to me, he's like, you've got to watch this DVD, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. It's about this Australian guy, used to be a broker or trader, and he films himself, going around America. And I was like, okay, cool. And this guy and I always do swap movies and books and whatever. And so that's how I found out about you. I literally watched your show on Netflix, and I was like, oh my word, this guy is so cool. I'm going to have to speak to him. Or somehow, it was just so weird. It was one of those things 2 years ago. I was like, I'm going to have to talk to this guy somehow, not that we had any platform or anything to do it. I was just like, so, and then, since then I've seen, all the other shows as well. And it's kind of like, I feel like I'm sort of starstruck in a way, like chatting to you, you know what I mean? Because, watching you on Netflix and then, now I'm chatting to you, it's quite cool.
Gareth, I'm just a normal bloke just trying to do my best, mate. But no. I do get a bit of that. Like, I have to actually, remind myself sometimes that I've done these movies because I don't think about them 24/7, right? Yeah. And so I'm out in the street, I'm out walking around, I'm in a store, and people come up to me and say, do I know you, or how do I know you? Or and then I'll go, well, if you've watched Netflix, and then they get it, or, I'll be going through customs in the US, and the immigration guy checking me through will stop and he go, damn, I can't take a selfie here. I'd love a selfie, but we can't do it. So I sometimes forget that, not sometimes, I often forget.
Yeah.
And, but people are very, very nice. And look, it's been a very incredible ride for me because the movie's had such a huge impact on so many people's lives that genuinely people who come up to me are people that have had an incredible experience. And so they're very keen and excited to share the results of what happened to them in their life or what benefits have come about from taking some action to change their life. So I wish sometimes people could be on the other end of this, and every day, the messages that come through, the private messages, the emails, the just incredible. I've even got letters here that come through. People still write letters, and it's like it's 10 years later and it's still happening. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's so.
We often we get such amazing feedback from people, and we always super grateful. Obviously, we don't get as much as you do, at this stage, but it really does help to motivate one when you get stuff like that. But what I'd love to know is, everyone that's exposes themselves in a scenario online these days always talks about trolls and some negativity. Have you had any of that, or has it been sort of a plain sailing in your case?
Well, I got to be honest. I can't even. I mean, there has been obviously some bad comments and whatever, but honestly, I'd say it's very, very small. I mean, people get upset when I can't respond to every message. Yeah. So sometimes people get upset and angry at that. I do my best, but it's very, very difficult to respond to every single message or every tweet or everything, every comment. I do my best to read as many of the comments as I can and press the like button. That's become easier now, which I try to show that I've actually read it. But, if someone's asking me a question on social media that I have 240 characters or whatever the number is now, 280 characters that I have to explain something I wrote a book on, it's very difficult to sort of oh yeah, of course, I think a lot of people don't necessarily take well, let's go and Google Joe, or let's find out where Joe's website. Maybe he's already put all this information out there.
Yeah.
So, for people that have a genuine, specific question about themselves or whatever, I try my best to answer those. But if it's a general question like how many glasses of juice should I drink a day, if I had to answer that question every time it's come up, there's that's 20, 30 times a day. Yeah. People can find that information out. I'll put it up on a free website. So some people get angry, but overall, I never did this to be like some strict athlete that's 10% body fat. So sometimes people don't realize that, when you're 310 pounds at the beginning of your journey and you go down to 210 pounds, 220 pounds, that, at the end of a 60-day fast or whatever, you're going to gain weight back up when you start eating. Totally. And you're going to go back up to 240, 250. And so, life happens, fluctuations happen. You get stressed, you don't train, you're on a good run. 10 years is a long time to have the pattern. So there's always some people that are always surprised sometimes when a photo makes you look bigger, but then the next photo with a different angle makes you look different. So I tend not to get worried about that. I kind of tend to just be concerned about how I feel about myself. And I know there have certainly been times in the last 10 years, probably 2 years ago, when I wasn't in a good way because of stress and all sorts of stuff. And, you just slip and, stress. I think stress from relationships, stress from finance, stress from travel, stress from family. There's all sorts of stresses that can affect your life, And a lot of the traveling can affect me by time zones and having to get up early to go on a TV show at 6 a.m. and it's 2 a.m. and you're dealing with something in Australia and it's how am I going to sleep? And those things can get you worked up. So then the next day you're exhausted. So you might have a bit more sugar than you normally would. And then all of a sudden that snowballs. And after your 3-week tour, you've gained 5 pounds and it's oh my gosh. But I tend not to let it get me down or worry. I just know that I've got the tools in my armory to bounce back.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the cool thing is you're so, open and honest about these things. And that's what sort of attracts people to you is that, you're like this, you even though you've done all these awesome things, you're still just such a normal guy. And that's sort of what attracts them to you, which is great, because everyone is in the same boat. We are all living life and, like I said, full of
100%.
stresses and stuff.
Well, I think that today's world, transparency is what it's all about. And the more transparent you are, the more people will appreciate that. The more people will they will gravitate towards the truth. If you start to deviate away from the truth and you start to tell porky pies, as we say in Australia, which is the slang for lies, if you start doing that, then it starts to what actually happens is that people can pick up on it, because people have got very, very good radars for non-truth. And so I've always just believed, forgetting even about before making the movies, just in life, that, the truth will set you free. And that, you just got to try and be as truthful and as upfront and as honest as possible. And then you won't trip over yourself, because if you just say from the heart what it is, then, 3 years' time when you're asked the same question, unless you've had a fundamental belief change, you'll answer the same and you won't get tripped up.
Yeah, totally. There's actually
and that came across in that in your first movie that you made. I mean, it was just very frank account of what you went through, and I think that kind of trend has just stayed there, and the world has sort of become more like that. But you were actually sort of following that trend pretty early on, which makes it easy to follow,
Yeah, well, when we made Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, and I was interviewing people to come on the road with me, like camera, producer, that sort of stuff, like people because I never made a movie before. It was very interesting when I was doing the interviews. People were like saying, "Yeah, we're going to go out there and tell all these people what to do. We're going to tell them to eat this." I'm going, whoa, 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 whoa. If you have a look who you're talking to. I mean, I am fat, sick, and nearly dead. This isn't about other people. This is about my journey. If I'm going to go out there and start pointing the finger at people, I mean, that's not. Who am I? Who am I to tell somebody what to do? All we're going to do is we're going to focus on what I'm doing, and I'm going to share that story with people. People want to share a story with me, great. If they don't, no dramas. So that was the philosophy of this. It was not about going out and telling people what to do. I think people are sick of being told what to do. I think people respond far better to being shown what to do. And if it resonates within them, and that truth that we talk about, that inner truth resonates and connects, then they're more likely to follow rather than be told to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great Irish proverb, and it says, if you always tell the truth, then you never have to remember anything. I think that's that's a good way to look at things. You know what I mean?
I agree 100% with that one.
Yeah, for sure. So just before we kind of move on a little bit to understand a bit more about your upbringing and that, now we touched on some of the stuff about people changing their lives and the influence you've had on them. I mean, it must be quite amazing getting these messages, you know what I mean? And just watching what we've seen, say, on the Netflix documentaries on especially Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead 2, the impact that you had on some of the people that you met, and not just the people, but people that they knew, their communities, whatever. I mean, that must, what is it like? How does it feel? Does it make you kind of emotional, happy? You literally change people's lives, but.
Look, I think that, so I don't think I'm changing their lives. I think what I am is I'm a catalyst for change in their life. So I don't take it to the degree where I'm actually the agent of change. They are themselves. But like I just said, what I was able to do was to share a story that captured people into a moment where they felt, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And that is, I've always believed in my life that the secret to happiness is being useful. And so I feel that I've been very useful in this journey. And because I've been very useful and I've offered something up that a lot of people resonate with and therefore create change and action in their own life from their own from their own inner self. You know, I didn't make a movie by going there saying, righto America, righto South Africa, righto Great Britain, righto Australia, you're all going to do this. I mean, you turn that off in 5 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, the reality is, for me, is that I believe that being useful is all about happiness. So because it's been quite useful, and I continue every day to try and be of service, I try to be useful in what I'm doing, to a degree where I can be effective and not inefficient, because I think you can try and be useful and be inefficient, and that's not good. But it's got to be true usefulness, and that's the secret to happiness. That's what makes me happy. So the answer to your question is, yes, I feel incredible happiness and gratitude from this, but at the same time, I don't feel that happiness and gratitude, you know, that I was the reason that these people did it. I was a step. I was a part of it. People were probably, or most likely, wanting to make change. They just needed that last push.
Yeah.
So just discussing that a little bit further, you know, the dynamic between yourself and others, was a little bit of this journey sort of to hold yourself a little bit accountable? Was it like, I'm going to go and do this, and now I'm forcing myself to be accountable, and through others, I'm going to also be even more accountable? Was there some of that happening?
Oh, look, there was definitely that. It was actually twofold. There was the, you know, people ask me, why did you make the movie? And, you know, what I didn't know then, but I know now, is that community and support is really important if you're going to make fundamental lifestyle changes. It's very, very important. You know, doing things on your own, yes, it's possible, but it's harder. You are far better if you're doing something with somebody else. That can be a loved one, that can be a family member, which sometimes are the same thing and sometimes they're not, or that can be with a friend, okay? Or that can be with someone who's just a random person online that you've signed up to in a group, and you're just accountable to that person. So for me, the idea of the camera was my community. The camera was my, okay, I'm accountable to this audience. So that was a personal thing. And then the second reason I put it on film was that I realized that I'm not alone being fat, sick, and nearly dead in today's world, right? It's like I'm actually not in the minority, I'm in the majority.
Yeah.
And so I thought, and I didn't know this was going to work, by the way. This is still like a crack shot. Because if I'd known it was going to work, I would have done it a lot earlier, all right? So I wasn't sick. But I felt that if it works, then this could be really valuable to share with people that could then be the impetus for them, like we talked about earlier. So it was a double-edged sword. There was the do it for me and do it for others. You know, when you're in financial markets and you're trading and you're making a lot of money and you're doing this, you know, like, yes, they provide a good service and we manage risk and we do all sorts of things for institutions and financial services. But at the end of the day, you're not really contributing a lot to society, in my humble opinion. And so it was nice to change tact, if you like, and give something back and try and do something that is more lasting for humanity than just making money. So, and look, and by the way, I've got a lot of friends that still do that, and they make a lot of money and they give money away in foundations and donations, and all that's cool too. But it was just a personal thing for me that I wasn't necessarily being gratified on a deeper level just making money.
Yeah, that's cool. That really resonates with us, you know, in terms of like human connection and stuff like that. So, you know, we've all seen, well, not we all, but like lots of people have seen the documentaries you've produced, and, you know, but maybe don't necessarily know more about you and your sort of upbringing. That, and part of the podcast is we like to find out more about our guests and kind of what makes them today. So, you know, you're obviously Australian, born in, it was Sydney, hey? And, you know, you've been around since '66 and had a very interesting upbringing, but like from a nice family. So do you just want to give us a bit about your upbringing and your childhood?
Yeah, sure. Look, I was born as you said, in the late '60s, 1966, I guess. Was that mid '60s? I don't know, but yeah, in the '60s, so 1966, and so I was sort of raised. I don't remember that. I remember the '70s. I kind of remember my earliest memories are like 1971, 1972. I remember going to the United States for 1 year. My dad is an orthopedic surgeon, and my mum was a nurse, and they met in a hospital. And they, luckily for me, they met in an elevator. So I'm really grateful to that elevator.
That's cool.
Because otherwise I wouldn't be here. So and they met in a hospital and got married and had me quite young. They were like, I think my mum was like 23 and my dad was 24 or something when I was born. And so I was raised, and Dad went to study in the United States. So I remember quite clearly going to the airport when I was like 4 or 5 to go to the United States to live in Columbus, Georgia for a year, and I went to school over there, and that was really interesting. I then moved around schools a lot because my mum, she stopped being a nurse and started decorating homes. We kind of did this whole buy a house, renovate, move, buy a house, renovate, move. And so I did like a kindergarten at one school, a first grade, then a second grade I did overseas, and then I came back and did a third grade, and then I went to another school for fourth grade, another school for fifth and sixth grade, and another school for high school. So I'd kind of been to, I think it was tallied up to about 6 schools in 7 years. So that was a very interesting sort of experience to have so much change when you're so young. And there was good and bad parts about that. It was good in that it gave me and made me have to have skills to be able to get out and meet people and make friends. But also it was difficult when you come into an already established group. You're the odd person out. And so I was very much open to what we would call bullying or mocking or, I think bullying is a global word that people understand in school. And so I had to deal with that quite a lot in my sort of, probably from when I was the age of sort of 8 through to sort of 15. And they're pretty formidable years of your life when you're actually fighting a lot. And I used to get in lots of fights. I was always a big guy, but I was kind of fairly straight and, sat in the, I had no older brothers or sisters to tell me what to do. And so I'd be sitting in the front of the bloody class with my hand up all the time. And that didn't do me any favors in the lunch break or after school. And as I was writing my book about 9 years ago, I remembered these moments that sometimes in the playground, the only friend I would have would be sugar. I'd come out and I would sit by myself and I would go to the canteen, or what we call in Australia the tuck shop, and I would get sugar, and sugar would make me feel good. Sugar would make me feel amazing. I would feel high. I would feel good. I would feel comfortable. And then I'd come home from school, and when I was much younger, when I say, around this age, 8 through to 15, 16, if I didn't have a job to do after school, like a paper run or do something, I would come home and I would get a huge bowl of breakfast cereal, and I would like have nearly half a packet. I'd have a whole liter of milk, or as the Americans like that's a whole
gallon or something.
Of milk. Whatever. I'm still a bit rusty on the fluid ounces, but I would load that up and I would put maybe 5, 6, 7 tablespoons of sugar on top of that cereal. Jeez. Oh yeah, like big ones. I was a sugar fiend, and it was a real connection to security for me. I really identified. I didn't know it then, but I identified that later. And I was an athlete, like I was young, I was running around, I was playing sports, so I was not overweight or anything. And you're a kid, right? But these are habits that you're building. And my mum and dad, very middle class family. They ended up being very successful because as an orthopedic surgeon and becoming very, very, very well known in this country and treating all of the athletes and so on. He had a very big practice. He's retired now, and mainly through my mum buying and selling houses, she actually did quite well financially. So they're very comfortable now, and but it wasn't always like that. But very fortunate for them. They've had a great life like that. They're still together, 53 years they've been married, and been a great example to my two brothers and sister. And so I think that, I was very much happy to be at home until I was 18 years of age, but I was always ready to get going and get out. And, after high school, when I didn't really do very well in school, I learn in different ways. And the idea of reading a book or listening to someone talk in class, that never really resonated for me. I kind of need to watch things. I need to do things with my own hands. I need to experiment. I need to do things to learn. And so I didn't do very well in school. I got I think out of all of the grades that I did, I got like an average of 54% or something like that. I did very well in maths, did very bad in English, but otherwise it was in the sort of just over the pass line. So that wasn't enough to do university or college. In Australia, I would have had to go back and repeat my senior year of high school to actually make it into a university or a college to get what we would call then the HSC school mark, but Americans call it the SAT and the leaving or whatever you want to call it, but that score that you need to go to a tertiary education. So mine wasn't good enough. So I just said, right, well, I'm just not going to do that. I'll just go and get a job. And so I was very fortunate that I was listening to the radio, and it was in the summer because obviously you finish school here in the summer at the end of October, November. And it was around December, and I heard an advertisement on the radio channel in a morning breakfast show saying a telex operator, like computer telex, because back then there was no email or anything. It was all telexes. Yeah. And that was like 1983. And so I went in for this interview, and they didn't need a telex operator. They needed like a mail boy or delivery boy, just to run parcels and messages around. So I just thought, it was in a bank. I'll do this, and maybe I can earn some money for 6 months, and then I can, pack up and go overseas and travel Europe for 6 months, and then decide what I want to do. Because I'm still only 17. I wasn't even 18 yet. And I got the job of delivering the mail. Now, what was interesting is that I went to an all-boys high school. Like, there was no girls at all in my high school. And here I am thrown into a job where I'm delivering mail around to all these office blocks in Sydney, and only girls are on the reception of all of these offices that I'm going to. So I thought this was the best job ever. I mean, I would have done that for the rest of my life. It was fantastic. Like all I had to do was go back to the bank that I was working for, a company called Elders Finance at the time, and I used to take all their statements. Instead of them putting them in the post, they needed to get these statements and these balances to their customers. And so I had a run that would probably be it would take 5 or 6 hours of the day. The rest of the time I'm in the office putting them in the envelopes to go out, and I kept coming back and forth. I made lots of friends with all these girls that were my age that were working on reception. I'd have lunch with them. It was like a lot of fun. It was like I was let free out of the jail, so to speak. So one of the places I used to have to take the deliveries to was the Sydney Futures Exchange, which was like the stock exchange, except it was kind of trading commodities, which for anyone at home who doesn't know what that is, that means like you go and watch that movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. That was futures trading. And so I used to love going down there because it was all of these guys, and some women, but mostly guys, that were all screaming out, yelling at each other, numbers. And I knew I had a good voice, and I kept pestering the guy down there, Malcolm Fox, who was the boss at the time. He's not with us anymore, old Malcolm. He was a nice old bloke, but he was like my father's age at the time. And I pestered Malcolm, give me a job, let me. Anyway, they put me on the floor, and then they put me out as a runner, and then on the phones. And after about like a year, or not even a year, probably 6 to 9 months from starting that job, I was actually a trader. I was one of those guys screaming out in the pit, probably within 9 months.
Wow.
So I had this very quick rise of like from a mailboy to a phone clerk to a runner from mailboy to a phone runner to a phone clerk to a trainee trader to a trader. And now I wasn't trading my own money or for anyone. I was just filling orders from the bank. Like you get an order, buy gold, sell silver, buy cattle, sell the US dollar. I just filled the orders. I'd go into the pit, scream out and fill the ticket. So it wasn't rocket science, but if you made a mistake, it could cost a lot of money. So the job really worked well to people who were confident, who knew maths, who had a good memory, and were confident. And I had all those things. So I was just lucky that I fell into that role. Now, the salary I started on was like $6,700 a year, which is like $125 a week. That was my starting salary when I was the runner, or, doing the deliveries. And by the end of that year, I was on like $27,000 a year, which was an enormous amount of money. It was like, this is crazy that I'm making this much money. This was like, over $500 a week before tax. And back in 1984, that was a huge amount of money to me and anybody back then. So, and I'm only 18.
You're still a youngster at this stage.
Yeah, I'm only 18. And then by the next year, I was on 60,000. And then, I think by the time I was 20, I was making less than just over $500,000 a year.
Wow.
So it became very quick, this rise to lots of money in my life from trading. And so I think when I was like 21 or 22, 5 years, I went out on my own and I became my own independent trader where I didn't work for a bank anymore. And I just sat in that pit, or stood in that pit actually, and just bought and sold off my own bat.
Wow.
And so for the next 5 years, I had 60 months of trading. I had one losing month and 59 winning months.
Wow.
So I was very good at that. I was very, very good at that. And I look back at that and I know I was very disciplined. I put all the hours in. I really worked very hard. And I was very good at what I did, but I got bored because once you become good at something, you want to do something else. So now I'm 28, and I was actually 27 because I've been doing it for 10 years. I had 5 years with the bank and 5 years for myself. And I decided it was time that, I probably should start my own company, because while you're doing it for yourself, guys, when you go on holidays, no money's coming in. You're not trading, so you're not making anything. And I realized that this was not a sustaining way for me to live my life, that if I don't go to work, nothing comes in the door. I need to create a business where income starts coming in.
Sorry, Joe, do you mind if I just interject there before you take to the next level? So how the hours that you're working, you know what I mean? Like you it's not. I mean, I can't imagine it's like an easy day. You know what I mean? And the job is not an easy job. Like it's still stressful. Because anything around money and managing money like that is a stressful job. Did you find it stressful, or were you kind of comfortable with that?
So it was only stressful if you were losing.
Yeah.
Right? If you're winning, it's not stressful. It's like the best job in the world. So I was very strict on my discipline. So, because you're working for yourself, it's very easy to go and play golf. It's very easy to go to the beach. It's very easy to take the afternoon off and go and get drunk. Because back in those days, I was drinking a lot, partying a lot, go to lunches. So it was very easy. You're your own boss. You do what you like. No one's there to tell you what to do. There's no check-in or check-out. There's no holiday pay or anything like that, right? But what would happen with me is that I would have a goal that I had a target to achieve in terms of the amount of points that I needed to make, which were actually dollars. So 1 point was like $85 in terms of the trading. So I'd try and make 20 points in the morning. I'd try and make 20 points in the afternoon. And if I've done that, then, I would say, right, I'm done. I'm going to go home. That's a good day. That's a good earn. And then if you're down in the morning, then you've got to work extra hard. And so then you would keep track of these ups and downs. And so some months you would get stressed towards the end because you'd be down for the month, and you've got to try and work out ways to you got to put the effort in. And it's all about focus. It's all about really discipline. To me, trading is, because there are lots of opportunities in the marketplace, but you've got to go hunting for them. It's like you're following the money.
Yeah.
You're it's like a hunter out there tracking its prey. In trading, you're trying to get the capital flow, and you're trying to get in or get on that capital flow and get out, get in and get out. And so to me, it was, I never sort of found it stressful until I started the company. When I started the business and I started having staff and I started having shareholders and I started having KPIs and I started all of that, that's when I found it stressful, because now I've got a responsibility to others. When it was just me on my own, it was stressful if you lost.
And did you
so
have...
Joe, you've had this...
Sorry.
You've had this sort of meteoric rise. That's really, quite steep curve that you're talking about there. The obvious question is did you have this meteoric rise in weight, or had you, I would love to see, where, for people listening, what are the triggers? Was it stress? Was it timing? Was it, was it lifestyle? Where did this sort of lead from?
So at this stage of our story, up to 28, I'm very fit, very lean. I'm training, I'm standing in my job for 9 hours a day. This is not sitting down work. And I'm playing football. I'm going to the gym. I'm lifting weights. So the amount of caloric intake I'm taking, I'm burning a lot of it off with a lot of activity. Now, was it healthy? I'm not saying it was healthy, but when you're young, when your body is young and growing and you're in your early 20s, you can do a bit of damage to yourself and the body will bounce back, right? It wasn't until I founded the company, and from the day that I founded the company when I was 28, and then when I sold it just before the movie, 40, that's when the 100 pounds came on, during the ownership of being a CEO and a founder of a business and having those external pressures. And now I really couldn't go and do what I wanted to do. I was an employee of my own company. I didn't own the whole company. So I was accountable, and now there's late nights and there's stress, and now there's pizzas being ordered and there's takeaway Chinese being ordered. And now it's like, okay, I don't have time to go shopping. I don't have time to do any of that. I'm just gonna have takeaway the whole time. And by the way, I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to go and play football anymore. I don't have time for any movement. I am in the office at 7 in the morning and I'm leaving at 8 at night. And it's all about making this thing a success. So it was all about the wealth, not the health.
Yeah. And who taught you the discipline, those years you were managing your kind of own money and stuff? Did you have a mentor, or how did that come along?
I would say that the discipline probably came in from my grandfather. I used to speak to my grandfather a lot we used to bet on the ponies, the horses. And we would have 50-cent bets on 5 or 6 horses. On a Tuesday night, I would speak to him for the races on a Wednesday. And I would speak to him on a Friday night for the races on a Saturday. Anyway, when I was 14, he passed. And so that was a big shock to me, to lose my grandfather. And because he'd been an alcoholic in his life, I decided that in honor of him, I would not drink alcohol till I was 18. And I did that I made that decision at 14.
Wow. So
this was a big decision that I made, not realizing the calculations that I was now going to be in high school and not be drinking alcohol, and what was that going to be like. But when I started my job on delivering that mail around, I was still 17. So I actually had my first beer, first bit of alcohol ever in my life on my 18th birthday. So I think that the discipline that I developed just in that little, I guess, honor or to him, to my grandfather, as a bit of a, salute to him. I think that really helped. When you're a 17-year-old kid and everyone's drinking around you and you can say no, and you'll be the designated driver, or you'll just be the smart one there and maybe go home early. And sure, you miss out on a lot of fun, and you miss out on a lot of things when you're the straight person at a party. So But I think that served me very well in discipline. And I've always found that I think discipline is something that I've always, been able to muster up when needed.
There's that psychological research, I'm sure you've seen it, where they have youngsters and kids and they offer them like treats, and the kids that are able to delay gratification are the ones that end up being the most successful and the most sort of diligent later on. So you just I think did that whole research.
I think in that study, what they do is they say to the kids, look, you can have one of these now, but if you wait 2 hours, you can get 2 of them.
Yeah.
I think that's what they do. They give them double 2 hours later. I know the research, and that's very, it is. I think that as humans, we don't actually have that inbuilt skill to think big picture. It's sort of not, it hasn't really been necessary for our survival to think big picture as much as people think. Like for the first time right now, I mean, we are affecting the planet as a species in the last 150 years. I mean, we're blowing an ozone hole in our own atmosphere for, the millions of years of life on this planet and the hundreds of thousands of years of life of Homo sapien, or 240,000 years of Homo sapien, and sort of 5 million years of humanoids, if you like, of our forebearers. They never made an impact on the world like we have in 150 years. Back then, they couldn't do things every day that would impact their life 50 years down the road because they didn't live that long. So we now are doing things in our 20s, in our 30s, in our 40s that come back and pay us back in our 60s, 70s, sometimes even 50s and 80s. And so this is a mechanism that we don't have the inbuilt defense mechanism, if you like, to prevent us. Like smoking, I used to smoke quite a lot. I was a big smoker when I got on the drink. But, the idea when you're 23 or 25 to tell somebody don't smoke because that's going to give you emphysema when you're 60, 23-year-old, 60 is so far down the road. Even if you told him, if you see the adverts and if you see the photos, ain't going to happen to me. I'm infallible. I'm 23 or whatever the age is. So that's just humans. That's how we are. And we haven't developed that skill yet. So I think that you're right in that when you actually can impose discipline for a bigger goal and you can bring that to the party, I do believe it's an advantage. And I'm fortunate enough to have had that advantage.
Sure, yeah.
And how do you think we do instill that in our thinking, to prepare us for the future? Because I know exactly what you mean. People just they don't think strategically about their lives and about their health. It's kind of much more short-term and in the moment.
Well, I think it's changing, Gareth. I think people, particularly younger people, millennials are really starting to go, hey, I don't want to be like mum and dad, I don't want to end up like them. And you have these, each generation sort of does a rebellion on the generation before. And I think that what's happening in this generation, in there's many changes going on, but one of the changes is they really don't want to eat the food that they don't know where it's come from. Like there's this real sense of, I want to know what I'm putting in my mouth because I don't trust big business. I don't trust government. I trust individuals. I trust people that I will connect with, but I don't trust institutions like we used to. And therefore, with that lack of trust, people are more inclined to go an extra step, be it on YouTube or just using the web or through an app or a book to find more information about what is going on internally in their own body. And so I see this evolution happening, but still there's a lot of people that are not on that wavelength. And to answer your question specifically, I think it starts with practice. It starts with being more mindful. You just have to be more aware. It's very easy to wake up in life and just roll with the punches and just go through the go through the stages, just yep, I do this, I do that, and not think about anything. It's the awareness that you need to have. You need to catch yourself and make sure you're not picking your phone up every 5 minutes to check your phone when it didn't make a noise. It's the awareness that maybe you need to get off a subway stop, 2 stops before your subway stop, so you can get some incidental exercise in your day. Maybe you need at lunchtime to go outside and get 20 minutes or 30 minutes of daylight as opposed to stay in the rec room. It's these awareness. It's awareness of breath. It's awareness of movement. It's awareness of your sleep habits and whether you've got too much bright light on at night before you go to bed. And is that going to make it harder for your circadian rhythm to kick in? And so it's all of these awareness things, and it starts with little things, just little steps. And slowly over time, you collect these ideas, you collect these habits. I mean, I've always had a curious mind, and having a curious mind is very helpful. And people can practice having curious minds. They can start a habit, right? I'm going to learn one new thing about one new country. I'm going to learn a new country per day, as an example. I'm going to learn a new city per day. I've got an app on my phone called the Fact Book, the World Fact Book. It's a great app. I think it's like $2. and you can look up any country and you can read about any country's GDP, their religion, their people, their geography, their history. And it's a great thing if you've just got 5 minutes and you've got to wait in a waiting room, or you've got to wait for an airplane, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can just use your brain to find something new and get some new information, And I've always been somebody that loves collecting jokes. I can sit down and just talk jokes the whole night. If someone else is telling a joke, I'll tell a joke, they tell a joke. I can just keep going. And so some people are storytellers. Some people can do that, and some people just love listening to jokes. They're not better or worse. They're just different types of people. And I've always been that storyteller, collect information, find out more, want to know this. How can I be different? How can I do that? But, there are times in my life where I've sort of put that aside because I had a greater goal. And that was like, when I was like 28 and I started that business, it was all brand new. I was learning a lot in the business. I just wasn't learning a lot when it came to me and my health and wellness.
Yeah.
I think, there's, like you said, there's so many amazing ways these days to get information, like podcasts, for example. But,
absolutely. I'm an avid podcast listener. I mean, podcasts are an incredible way. You go for a walk, you're in your car, you're on an airplane flight, close your eyes if you're on a plane, and you just listen. And, I am a huge believer in the power of audio.
Yeah, for sure. But while we've opened that door, I'd love to walk through it and just discuss a bit more about, obviously, more specifics in your health and health in general, because obviously that's something where I think we can all bring a bit of value, like, and specifically through your story. So at this stage, you're like 40 or just before 40, you know, when you did the show, the first one, at what stage did you notice, like, listen, I'm really not well. This is not, my health is not good. And then what was the trigger and lead us down the pathway of what made you decide to ultimately end up with juicing specifically? So I'd love to sort of go in that direction.
Well, after I set up the company, and I realized that my life was changed for a long time until I sold the business or didn't do it anymore, I started to gain weight, but I didn't care about that. But what actually happened when I was 32, so, 4 years in, I broke. I actually just was in LA. I'd done a big deal. It was a very exciting day. And I was in a hotel down near San Diego, and I'd had a game of golf. It was like a Friday afternoon. And all of a sudden, my hands started to swell up and my feet started to swell. And this rash started coming up my arm, and thought that was weird. My lips started to swell, my eyebrows and eyelids, and I was having this huge anaphylactic reaction where the histamine in my body was just going crazy. And I called the hotel doctor, and, they gave me some tablets. The doctor gave me some tablets, but I got on an airplane basically the next night back to Australia, back to the medical people I knew here and connections through my father. And I was put into hospital, and I was in hospital for about a week, and they didn't know what it was. And it became this word idiopathic, which is actually, we don't know what it is. We just know that it's not good. And I had this idiopathic disease that was a whole bunch of things. It was a rash, which is like urticaria. It was chronic. It wouldn't go away. And I had swelling under the skin, which is angioedema. So it was coined chronic urticaria angioedema was my illness. We don't know how you got it. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to get it away. But we can give you these drugs, this prednisone, that you can just bombard your body with, and that will docile things down. It won't fix the problem, and it's going to cause all these other problems. But if you want to get by, that's what you got to do. And so I couldn't walk. I mean, my feet were too swollen to walk. It was a terrible thing to happen. Particularly, I couldn't believe it happened to me. I was on top of my game. And so I started taking the meds, 60 milligrams a day of this very powerful steroid,
Wow.
which anyone will tell you is just the side effects are moon face, hunchback, osteoporosis, weight gain, all sorts of really, really bad side effects. Now, my weight at this stage, I'm probably 50 pounds more than when I started, like 4 years earlier, maybe 40 to 50. But then this really put it on, because now I couldn't do any exercise. Now I couldn't play golf. I couldn't play tennis. I couldn't do anything.
And you're on the prednisone.
Well, yeah, because I couldn't carry groceries. I couldn't hold a baby. I couldn't, I had a girlfriend at the time. We go to a concert. I couldn't put her on my shoulders to see over the heads of people, because I just couldn't deal with that physical pressure on my body, any touch. The physical touch was a trigger to my hives. And so for the next 5 years, 6 years, I really went down the traditional medical route. I went and saw all these doctors. I went and saw all these experts. I had my blood spun out and re-spun in. I tried experimental medications. I tried lots and lots and lots of things. But unfortunately, it just ended up where I was nothing worked. And I was just back to where I was on the same amount of steroids that I was previously. So then I thought, right, well, maybe what I should do is I should try Western, like the Eastern world. Maybe I should go the other side, the dark side. So I started seeing Chinese doctors, herbalists. I started seeing naturopaths. I did mud huts. I saw witch doctors. I mean, I did all of these things, I did everything. But the one thing which some people were telling me to do, which I just couldn't do, which was to stay away from my burgers and my fries and my beer and my Coke and my ice cream. And, how could that affect your health? I mean, as if, this is me back then, as if that's going to be causing this disease, Sure, that gains weight. I knew that. But I had no concept of how food was connected to illness like this,
Very few people still do, unfortunately. Actually,
and I was very naive. All right, and we're now talking, 20 years ago. Well, not 18 years ago when I first got sick, and so it was one of those things where it's actually 19 if I do the maths correct, because I'm 51 now and I got sick when I was 32, so it's 19 years, and so I sort of didn't want to give up my food and my sugar and my fat and my salt. I just didn't want to give that up. And then I got to a point where I turned 40, and hitting 40, I don't know what it was. It was a big moment. It was like this, like as Oprah would say, it was the aha moment. I was standing there in the mirror, and I'd been out for my 40th birthday party the night before, and I'd drunk, 10 beers, 2 bottles of wine, I had a half a bottle of vodka. I had so much Chinese food. There I was on my 40th birthday, 320 pounds, and I'm leaning in for the medicine. And I'm looking at myself. And there was this moment where I just didn't recognize who that person was. And I remember it was only 20 years ago that I was a fit, healthy, young 20-year-old athlete that, I was working hard and I was doing well, but I was, playing competitive rugby, and I could run 10 miles at the drop of a hat, and I was 120 pounds lighter. And I kind of figured that in that little moment, that if that took just 20 years and I'm 40, what if I project forward to when I'm 50 or 60? Wow. What's going to happen with the trajectory? And I'm a smart guy. I'm a trader. I know trends. And so I knew the trend was not good and it was going to be pretty bad. So at that moment, I decided that I really needed to stop procrastinating and really do something. I kept putting it off. Yeah. I'm busy. I'll get to it later. My diet, because deep down I knew there was some connection that I probably needed to do something. And so I sort of, because I'd done a lot of startups by this stage, I didn't have my one company. I had a bunch of other companies that I'd started. And I knew that what it takes to actually make something, you got to really put the focus and effort in. So I decided to kind of be the CEO of my own health, my own startup, to get myself well. Okay. And when you turn on that messaging in your brain that you are now serious about this, and you make that internal commitment, and you have the scare, if you like, because I'd had the scare, which was, what's my life going to be like, and what's that quality of life going to be? I then, it's funny how your ears are open. You're ready to listen and hear stuff. Like everything else is closed up until that moment, but now you're ready. And Professor Ron Penny, who actually is in the first movie, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, he said to me, he was treating me for my autoimmune disease for 8 years, and he said, Joe, 70% of all disease is caused by lifestyle choices. What you eat, what you drink, how much exercise you do or don't do, what your sleep is like, whether you smoke or not, how connected you are, and how you manage stress. These are the big six. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not doing too well. Maybe on family and friends I'm doing well, but the rest of them, it's looking pretty bleak. So I kind of thought, well, being a maths guy, that 70% means that 70% of the time, all these illnesses, all this pain and suffering is coming because of us. So that means 30% of the time, just bad luck. It's like wrong place, wrong time. It means, blame your parents' genetics or whatever it is, but, it ain't my fault. But 70% of the time, it's my fault. 30%, not my fault. So this was pretty good odds to get, like, from a position of being sick to being well, because I had a 70% chance that I was the problem. And this was kind of like a good thing, if you like. So I kind of felt my odds were in my favor, because being a maths and a trader guy, the risk reward was, well, I've really hammered myself for 20 years since I left home. I'm 40 and I left home at 18, but, call it 20 years. And I thought, well, I probably need to stop eating as much processed food that I'm eating. I need to go back to plant food. I need to go back to the whole food that Mother Nature sort of, provided, and that this species of which I'm a part of, this Homo sapien, we've been the most successful on this planet, and kind of like plants were here first, and we've used those plants in a really big way to propel our life forward. I mean, they give us warmth when we put them on a fire. They give us shelter in a home. They do this magic dance of breath with taking CO2 that we breathe out into O2 back for us. And they, of course, provide these incredible nutrients through the magic of photosynthesis. Give us celery, they give us cucumber, they give us kale, they give us apples, lemons, and ginger, and the list of blueberries and strawberries goes on. They give us these incredible nutrients. And so I kind of realized that I'd shut the door on that sort of food group, and I was mainly eating animal product and processed food and very little plant food. So I decided that, well, what if I went kind of extreme, and did like 2 years of just eating plant food? What if I did that? That kind of could be something worth doing, because this was how I was going to fix the sickness part. Because going back to that day on my 40th birthday, I mean, when I looked in the mirror, what I saw back was someone who was fat, sick, and nearly dead. And that was kind of like where the title came from that conversation that I had with myself. So the sick part, I kind of realized that maybe if I just eat all these veggies and fruits and live off nuts and beans and seeds, that I'm at least going to give myself a shot at finding out, am I in the 30%, which is just never going to be cured, or I mean the 70%. So that was kind of the first premise. And this all didn't happen, by the way, in front of the mirror. This took sort of 3 or 4 months of thinking, research, talking, being focused, like any startup. You just don't do it overnight.
Yeah.
And then the reason for being fat, I was trying to work out, well, what's the advantage of being fat? Like, why are we fat? Why do humans get fat? Like, what's been the survival reason? You know, what was the benefit of being able to store fat? And of course, it comes down to being able to manage 2 reasons: manage your energy stores in lean times, so you can store up energy, and also to regulate your body temperature during seasons. So this idea of fat all of a sudden came from being the enemy to fat is actually my friend. Because if I'm in Sydney, Australia, and there's a food bloody shortage and all of a sudden the whole world has no food, I'll be one of the last people standing because I've got enough breakfast, lunch and dinner for a couple of years on at 320 pounds, right?
Wow.
So I started to look at fat as not a negative, but as a positive, and that it's just unused energy. It's just energy waiting to be used. It's just sitting there saying, Joe, I'm at your service and ready to go when you need me. But if I keep putting energy in, then I'm sort of allowing that new energy that I'm eating to jump the line, so to speak, right? And make that other energy that came in maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it's just still waiting. Yeah. It's still waiting to be transformed into this magical thing we call life. So this is where I thought, well, hold on a second. Maybe I just shouldn't eat. Maybe I should just do like 2 months of not eating and just drink water and create my own famine. But that was at odds with the earlier discussion about I'm going to eat plants. I need to get healthy. I need the nutrients. So when you think about what a plant's mostly made up of, they're made up of water. What's in the water? The water is where those nutrients live. That's where they hang. And the fiber or the cellulose around the plant is Mother Nature's packaging and delivery system. It does other good things as well with your bowel and slowing down the absorption of various food groups such as the sugars. But at the end of the day, if I was to drink the water that was filtered through plants, we call that juice or real fresh squeezed and fresh cold pressed or however you want to call it. It's not the juice that's in the middle of a store that's at ambient temperature in a can that can last 6 months because that's just reconstituted flavoring and sugar and water. I'm talking about freshly extracted water from plants. I felt that I was still in line with my earlier 2-year commitment to plants and that I was in line with this idea of a famine. So I just randomly picked 60 days as a number because it was 2 months of 2 years. It just sounded right to be the length of time. And so I decided that I would combat my fat, sick and nearly dead self with fat being a famine, an imposed famine, and sick being an imposed prison sentence to only having fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, and seeds. No animal product and no processed food, which is a really tough thing to do, I've got to tell you. And so the journey, like I had this plan, I talked to some doctors, I shared it with them. They thought it was pretty extreme, but I felt that I was in an extreme situation. I was 320, sometimes 330, depending on the day I got on the scales. Very heavy man. I always had lots of problems with blood pressure and cholesterol, and my blood sugars was pre-diabetic. I'm on all these medications, not only the prednisone, I'm on other medications because of the issues that I've got, and you know, a lot of other antihistamine medications. So I'm basically a basket case, and I'm just 40 years of age, right? So I felt that I was in quite an extreme situation anyway. So to do something this extreme, I kind of felt that it matched up with that fire and fire. Like you got to fight fire with fire. You got to come at this thing head on. And so that's basically how this idea of juicing came about to me. Obviously, people had juiced before. It wasn't like an idea that I created, but I came at it from a very logical point of view. And then when I decided to do that, it was only after I started telling friends that I was going to do this that the idea of putting a camera on me and making a movie out of it sort of came to fruition.
Yeah, Joe, I feel like we kind of need to transcript everything you just wrote there, because there was so many lessons. It's like, this is a new book, right, by Joe Juice. Like, listen to it, you know, because there's so much value in it. Just a couple of things before we get on to the actual the journey, the story of the 60 days. How did this affected your confidence? Like, were you like down in the dumps at all, or were you kind of still?
Oh, when I was sick. Oh, you bet. I mean, it was. I mean, I remember I would walk along and look at people and go, "Why me? You know, why isn't it that person?" I mean, this is a very. It was a very depressing thing. I just think I'm very fortunate that I have such a positive outlook on life. I think if I had like an average outlook on life, or even, you know, a negative outlook on life, it would have been years of depression, because it is not something you don't want this disease on your worst enemy. This is not a fun thing. This is you just don't know how you're going to wake up in the morning and what joint is going to be filled with histamine that you can't close your elbow, or you can't clench your hands. You can't turn your car key on because the pressure in your hands, they're throbbing. And that's with the medication. So, yeah, no, it was a very tough time. But I guess that I used the job and the focus of being all encompassed in my work as the distraction, that sort of I was able to sort of put that stuff on the side and just do my work and you know, count the money, so to speak. So it was tough, no question. But you know, the brain does these things and tricks on you. You don't remember the tough times as much as you remember the good times. But if I really think back to some of those days and times, yeah, lots of tears, lots of moments in the lounge room or on the bed on your own, just like, you know, swearing at the world. Why me? Why me? Lots of days like that.
Yeah, you kind of feel like a victim, don't you?
100%. And then, of course, you know, my mum and dad, family members hated seeing me like this. And I called it the issue. I didn't want to call it disease. I called it my issue. So it became the issue. Like, I can't do that because of the issue. The issue's no good today. I can't do this. I can't come to the barbecue. No, the issue's a problem today. It was I created a word for it, the issue, which in hindsight probably wasn't a very good thing, because it's like it's the issue. But that's how I used to refer to it.
Joe, how did, you know, along this journey, you obviously had to start figuring things out yourself, and having two parents from a very sort of, let's say, traditional Western medical background. When you started to put your feelers out and started discussing things with them and saying, "Oh, I've seen an acupuncturist," or whatever. I mean, I'm not sure of all the people you've seen, or you said, "Look, I'm thinking that perhaps this disease or the issue is coming from a lifestyle factor." I could imagine that some of the medical mindset might have been, "Well, no, that's not really possible. You know, unfortunately, you know, you've been given this lot in life, and kind of have to. There's some good medicines for this." And did you guys ever clash at all on that sort of front?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And the reality is at the very beginning, because I had done the 5 years of their way and we hadn't gotten anywhere, they were equally as exhausted and willing and happy to support me in trying anything. So I think that if I'd gone immediately to the wacky world, so to speak, and I'd done that for 5 years, they would have been very angry. "Oh, you didn't try our way first," you know?
Yeah.
So it was because I was like-minded like them. I went that way. Because we exhausted that and no results, it's like anyone goes in with a predefined, you know, expectations and what you're going to do it. Once you've exhausted all those and you haven't got a result, you'll try anything.
Autoimmune diseases are particularly tough in terms of Western medicine to treat chronic illnesses like that. So it is a really interesting sort of idea in healthcare these days of like finding ways to get to the bottom of all autoimmune issues, you know. And so I think it's a really, really valuable thing that you're doing, just sort of having the open discussion about it.
Yeah, look, I think that, you know, I don't call it healthcare. I call it sick care, Gray, because that's what it is. I mean, you know, it isn't healthcare; it's sick care. And I find that if you really want to take the step back and look at this in a holistic approach, I'm a big believer in incorporating both into the solution, not like one or the other. Sure. There's a lot of great doctors out there and nurses and people that are in the sick care system that are trying their hardest to give their best to people. But, you know, that doesn't mean you exclude them and only go down the local road with, you know, your witch doctor or shaman. There's a place for them and there's a place for the scientists. And I think what we've got to do is be not try and put ourselves in boxes, not try and label ourselves. You know, I'm not big on labels of I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian, I'm pescatarian, I'm, you know, paleo, I'm keto. I think all these labels are crazy, you know? Like, you should experiment, try things, do this, see what happens, see how you feel good. But don't put yourself in a box, because if you do that, you can find yourself in trouble that you sort of you fenced yourself in this own little paradigm, and sometimes the answer could be in the next field.
Sure.
Joe, there's like pictures of you and videos of you in Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, like of all the medication you were on. This is going to be a two-part question. So how much medication were you on, and like how often were you sort of taking it each day, like during the day and stuff? And then the decision to go on this journey, it obviously involved, I guess, shutting down your current business or something along those lines. So there was, I guess, that added pressure as well of maybe letting down people that worked for you, and you had to, you know, maybe get rid of a few people. Can you just run us through those?
Sure. So I was taking medication every morning and every night. And the main medication I was taking was prednisone, 60 milligrams, which is 30 milligrams in the morning and 30 milligrams at night. And then I was also taking some tablets that were different ones at different times for cholesterol and for blood pressure. But they were like only once a day tablets. They were not morning and night. It was the prednisone. Then I was taking a thing called Zyrtec every morning and every night as well, and I would carry the Zyrtec around with me during the day just in case I needed another antihistamine bump. And so I did those meds, and as you guys who have seen the film, but maybe some listeners haven't seen the movie, is that after the 60 days of juice, I was down to 2 milligrams. I'd gone from 60 to 2, but I was still on medication. Like, I wasn't completely off after 60 days of juicing. It was only another 90 days of eating on just the plant food that I was actually totally free of all medication and completely clear. And that was in March of 2008. And, you know, we're coming up to March 2018 soon. And therefore, it's going to be 10 years of medication free, probably for me in about 3 weeks' time. And I haven't taken any pills to do with any of those illnesses since. Now, I've had to take antibiotics twice, which I don't like taking, but I had to. Once I took a full course for a tooth infection. The other time I just took an injection because I had a chest infection while I was in Spain 2 years ago, and it just got to a really bad level. But apart from those two moments, I don't take any other meds. I don't take any medication. I don't take anything for anything. I don't take any blue tablets. I don't need anything, right? And I am doing my best to stay away. I take some vitamins, and I take minerals, and I take my plant food. And that's how I get my, you know, I take a vitamin D, and I take omega-3 fatty acid. I take those things. But, you know, as far as medication is concerned, none. Zip. Don't do it. Not even if I got a cold. I don't take an aspirin. I don't take a headache pill. I do no meds unless I absolutely have to, which are those two times. And then there was a time when I had a run-in with a cat, and I had to take an antihistamine. I think it was a Phenergan or something. But apart from that, that's it. Now, the next question was, well, I had sold my company. You see, the one I started when I was 28, I sold that at 40. So the main responsibility I had, I was actually sold. Now I only had investments that I was an investor in. So it wasn't like me being responsible. So when I actually made the movie, I didn't really have a worry about other responsibilities to anyone, Gareth. So I didn't actually have that pressure. That pressure came sort of 5 years later when I released the movie, or 3-4 years later when I released the movie, because by this stage, I had built a business around the film and a thing called Reboot. So then the pressure came back because there were investors in that. And so the pressure returned, but there was probably a 2-year period where it wasn't. And then, of course, the financial crisis came in 2008, 2009, and I'm in an edit room in New York City, and all my mates and everyone I knew was, we called the surf was up. I mean, the markets were going crazy. So they were big opportunities. And here was I in an edit room, and people thought I'd gone crazy because Joe just disappeared into some, dark black hole of a thing called a film, and nobody knew what I captured. Nobody had seen anything yet, right? And so it took 3 years to make that movie properly, to get it finished before it launched on Netflix in July of 2011.
Wow.
How did it take 3 years? Sorry, that seems like quite a long time.
So I was all finished. Movies tend to take about 9 months in total, if you sort of start to finish. So we started in October of 2007, and we were ready and wrapped up in June of 2008, and we're ready to go. And then I got the phone call from Phil. I got the phone call from the truck driver that I met along the way, who said, I need help. And because I had met 360 people on the way, and I had offered my card and number to every one of them, and he's the only guy who rang, I felt a responsibility that I at least need to go over and talk to him. So I told the guys in the edit room, I said, listen, we're not going to close the film yet. Maybe this guy could be in the credits. I didn't know his name or anything. I knew him as Phil, but I didn't know him. I never met him. And I said, maybe we can put this in the credits. And so I flew over in July of 2008 and met Phil, and then Phil's journey started. So Phil's journey basically went about 15 months. So it wasn't until the end of the end of 2009 that Phil's journey was complete, and I had to finish the movie with him running. So this was like, because I went down the Phil road, the movie got a lot more expensive and a lot longer, and no one knew how long it was going to go. So I kept trying to finish the movie. Had I known about movies, I should have just stopped, told everyone to go and get another job somewhere else, and we'll pick this up in 18 months' time. But I didn't know that, right? I didn't know movies. So we kept filming, and we kept having an ending, and then Phil would keep going, and we'd say, "Well, scrap that ending, we'll do another ending," and so on. Anyway, then eventually, at the end of 2009, we had a finished movie, and so for all of 2010, I went on tour to all the festivals. So the movie was finished, but it wasn't released. So now you've got to do the hard yards of going around the country, trying to get support, going to small towns, getting people to come and see your movie, which I did all in 2010 and the beginning of 2011. And then Netflix took it and put it on Netflix when they went streaming in 2011. And the rest is history. I mean, within the first 2 months, it was one of the most popular documentaries on Netflix, and you couldn't buy a juicer in America. And, blenders and juicers were all sold out. And I think $300 or $400 million worth of product actually shipped in those 3 or 4 months across the country, which is quite incredible.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Some royalties there.
Unfortunately, there weren't at that stage.
You can imagine Joe the juicer. You would have just totally be sitting on an island somewhere now. But
trust me, guys, I had thought of that, but I couldn't get anyone to support me on that. So that was a big opportunity that was missed.
Oh man, yeah, that was crazy. So that those 3 years, I mean, I guess were you literally filming every day, or what was day to day? Were you back and forth to Aussie, or? Yeah,
I became the owner of the project, and when you're in the edit room and you're owning it, and you got to make it right. And it's kind of like how long's a piece of string to when these things are going to finish. So it just took a long, long time because we didn't have an ending. Had I stopped and just had my journey, the film wouldn't have had the impact that it's had. I mean, it still would have been okay, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near like what we ended up getting. So I made the right decision from a spirit and a story point of view. Probably not the right decision from a financial point of view. It's super expensive, and you know you learn a lesson when you're paying 7 or 8 people salaries and you're keeping them all on all the time. When you don't need to have them on for a year. You just do the maths on that's $700,000 or $800,000 that you don't need to spend that you spend, but then you don't know you don't need it until you know it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations. But then, look, I got no regrets. That's life. Things happen. We move on.
You could almost argue that it was money well spent because if you didn't have that story of Phil, like you said, then it wouldn't have probably been as sort of like a success. Do you know what I mean? Or no?
100%. But what I'm saying is that had I been a seasoned storyteller in film, I would have known that what we now need to do is tell everybody to go and find another job, because most of these people are contractors, right? Go and work on another film. Let's just keep one guy with a camera on Phil. Let's see what happens over the next 12 months. I'm in no hurry. Let's just have one salary on Phil. I'll go and do some other stuff back in Aussie. We'll just put everything in a little box for a minute, and then we'll all get back together, and then we'll finish the movie once we've got all the footage in. So what was happening is Phil would get to 300 pounds, and we go, that's the end. Phil would get to 270 pounds, we go, that's the end. Phil would do this, he would do that. And so I had the team on because we never knew when Phil would stop. See, you couldn't predict that what happened would happen.
No.
But it was just a hindsight thing is easy now, but I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that I made the decision to keep going with Phil. What I didn't need to do was to keep all the people
the whole team
while Phil did what Phil did, if that makes sense.
Some of them were sitting there going, well, this is kind of great because I don't have much to do at the moment, but I'm still being paid.
Well, in fairness to them, we still did a lot because we kept finishing the movie.
Oh, yeah.
So we kept doing all the work that you need to do, hoping to finish, because you don't have these people sitting around doing nothing. But the problem is that we'd finish it and we'd have our ending, but it wasn't as good as what we then get in like a month later from Phil. We've got to put this in. So it was one of those moments where you just had to keep pushing it. And, look, you learn.
For sure.
The next 2 movies didn't have those problems.
Yeah.
I had a quick question, and it is a little bit out of left field here, and maybe perhaps a little bit random, but when hearing your story, like with Phil, he had an amazing transformation, and so did you in terms of your health and that kind of thing. How does something like that affect you? You've been sort of well, or let's say in inverted commas, or disease-free for, I don't know how many years now. You mentioned it.
10 years.
10 years. 10 years. Yeah. How does that in the real world, like, Joe sitting in Australia, how does that in terms of like your insurance, for example, do you have issues with that? Because you're like, you have this thing, even though now it's actually gone and you're well. How do you navigate that world of?
I haven't had a problem with that at all. By being transparent, I think that, when I go and get my insurance, and when I get key man insurance for my company and all those sorts of things, they go through the normal tests, and I get on and do all the cardiograms and everything, and I'm pretty good. Like,
that's
I
good.
had a test the other day for the calcium score, which you get when you're over 50. I had 0 calcium in my heart. And, I guarantee you that if I hadn't done what I had done, that would not be 0.
100%.
So there's no question that, look, I don't live a life anything like what I had set out to do of 60 days of juice and 2 years of just plants. That's a very, very extreme thing to do. I did that. I didn't do the 2 years because after 3 months I got healthy. So I didn't need to go and finish it. What I did is I kept eating lots of plants, and I slowly incorporated other foods into my life. So today, I will eat most things. There are certain things on the menu for me that are just no-go zones. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I don't drink soda, like Coca-Cola. I mean, it's just a no-go zone. So I haven't had Coca-Cola for over 10 years. Fast food, I won't eat that. So there are certain things that are just no. But there are other things, like if I came over to your house, Craig, and you're cooking up some grass-fed mince to make a burger, and we're going to have homemade burgers, I'm in, you know? So that's something that I don't sort of, I have a very flexible way of living now with my diet. I have to be very careful because too many carbohydrates will affect my mood, excuse me, and it'll affect my hunger. So I have to limit my carbohydrate intake. I try to have more fat and an equal amount of protein. Not equal to fat, but equal in terms of, what's 25% to 30% of my calories from protein. And I will 80% of the time, I'm really good. 20% of the time, I'm probably not as good as I should be. And that works for me. It doesn't mean, like I said, I'm not going to get a starring role on the next movie that,
You're not the next James Bond, but
no. I'm not saying I couldn't do Bond, but I'm not
get away with Bond, mate.
I'm not going to be. Bond wears a shirt. I'm talking about Baywatch. I'm just not going to get on the Baywatch series, right? So the point is though, is that to me, being healthy is not about how good you look on Instagram or on your Facebook or this sort of new standard. To me, being healthy is being able to do the things you want to do with ease. Being able to get out and do stuff and not have a problem with your knee or your ankle or your back or, I run out of breath and I can't do this. And it's those sorts of things. And it's being able to get good sleep at night and wake up and feel good about yourself. It's about having those internal positive conversations that you're not bagging yourself, and you're not nagging at yourself, and you're not telling yourself that you're hopeless, that you're fat, that you're ugly, that you're stupid, that you're a loser. It's being able to overcome those things, to me, is what being healthy is all about. And so this is, if I go out tomorrow and had 2 gallons of Coca-Cola and ate at McDonald's all day, that is not going to stop me from being healthy. It's not a good day. Okay. Now, if I did it for the next 5 years, it ain't good. But just doing that in one day isn't going to stop me. And all of a sudden, tomorrow night, Joe's suddenly become unhealthy. I have worked for 10 years on habits and on tips and on things, and I've built an armory and an awareness now that enables me to do a lot of these things naturally without effort. I don't need to focus too hard. The sugar one is still a hard one for me. Like if I go too much sugar, it still takes over, and I have to really pull myself back and implement some strict sort of no sugar guidelines for periods of days to get back into a balance. I haven't worked out quite how to have a big sugar day and then the next day be completely cool with it without focusing. The sort of the brain takes over and just pushes me towards the sugary stuff. But overall, I'm not the thinnest man in the world. I'm not the biggest man in the world. What I try to be is I try to just have a set of parameters, a set of guidelines, a focus of what I'm trying to do. I try to implement that the best I can, and I'm very happy if I can hit 80% of the time doing that.
Nice.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think the themes of like habits and balance are key in what you just said. So I'd like to skip ahead because just in the interest of time. First of all, I encourage people to definitely go and see Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, and then the sequel to that as well, because they're both really valuable in terms of the information you provide, the journey you go on, and also it's very heartwarming seeing the results of the impact that you had on a lot of those people, and it's really great. You kind of started this amazing movement, but then the next part, or the next documentary you've done is the kids menu, and I started watching it during the week, and then I finished it off last night. And for me, it was like one of the best documentaries I've watched because it's put such a positive spin on the way things are going and the potential that we have, you know, like if we do implement the right habits to kids as youngsters and we get them involved in their food and their growing of their food and stuff like that. So, I mean, can you just talk a little bit, like, I guess, about the film that people haven't for the people who haven't seen it, and also then like where things are going to go from there, because the whole education side of thing I think is amazing.
Yeah, so the kids menu is a very personal passion project that the team and I put together at Reboot. And the reason we went down that way was because everywhere I would go and talk and do speeches and go and do public events, always fundamental question out of the audience was, Joe, what about the kids? What about the kids? So we thought, hey, you know, why don't we make a movie about the kids? And the simple reality is it goes back to a little bit what I was talking about earlier, that these kids actually, they don't want to grow up being like their parents. They want to carve their own way. And, you know, this disconnect that we have in the school system between the food system and where it comes from, and, you know, like what's the point of learning algebra? What's the point of learning something about history from 400 years ago when these kids can't leave school making a plant-based meal? See, I think you could change the world tomorrow if every kid who left school starting this year could make 10 plant-based meals. Now, I'm not saying you've got to be a vegetarian or a vegan or not eat animal product or not eat processed food. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is give people, young kids, the confidence to be able to put together, using not food but ingredients, not a meal, put together ingredients to make a meal. And, you know, too many people leave the supermarket with food, not ingredients, right? So we got to have ingredients, and it's the making of those ingredients, it's putting them together. It's that ability to be able to have the confidence to take some cauliflower, take some turmeric, use some coconut milk, and pull that together, and now put in some shallots or this or that kale, and make this salad or make that curry or whatever it is that they want to make. And this, I feel that if we could wave a magic wand right now, and everyone in America and everyone in the UK and everyone in the Western world knew 10 great recipes that they liked, that they loved, that were all to do plant-based, we change the world tomorrow. Because people want to eat stuff that they like. Plant-based meals can be made to be sensational. Some of the best food I've ever had in my life is plant-based. So there is this opportunity that if you can inspire and you can educate and you can entertain these young kids, that's possible. And if you can do that, that's like one of the most valuable lessons that I believe that a kid should leave school with, is the ability to be able to make 10 different types of meals. Because you can do one, you'll get bored on that. You need 10 because that's like 3 every month, and that's a good variety. And also, if you can make those meals, that means you know that when you go into a supermarket or a farmer's market, you know what ingredients are, and you can now source out the best price, the best value. You can teach others. You can pass that knowledge on to your loved ones, your kids, when you grow up. I mean, it's a very powerful tool, that education tool of being able to make a meal. And the sad and tragic thing is that if you actually went out there now today and grabbed people who are in their 40s and 50s and said, make me 10 plant-based meals, they would struggle. You can go out now and find kids that are in their late teens, early 20s that can do it. The majority can't. And so if there was one thing I could change in the world tomorrow, like I always get asked that question, if you could change one thing, Joe, it would be I would change the last 2 years of school, earlier if possible, but I can live with the last 2 years of school, where there is actually a cooking course and a cooking class that the kids are doing every day. So that last 2 years, they're in a cooking class, they're learning how to do this, and they leave with that confidence.
Wow, I think that's such a practical, realistic thing that kids and families can do. You know, there's another show on Netflix, I think it was Cooked, where they where they discuss doing things as a family, and and cooking as one of those integral family affairs. And I think, and if you can incorporate that aspect with something like making a plant-based meal and teaching your kids to do that, like what a great combination. You're getting some of that family time, which is important, and you're learning a skill. And it actually, now that you put it like that, it just blows my mind that you can learn so many interesting facts at school, and you come out of there and have no, or maybe not none, but very few like real practical things that you can do tomorrow to make you a healthier, happier person.
I mean, it's insane when you think about it. It's actually insanity. And you talk about putting people back to work. You talk about creating jobs in the economy. Just by having, I think from memory, and I've got to just try and remember this. I think it's 3 million kids leave school in America every year. I think it's 3 million, graduate. So in 10 years' time, if you implemented this, you'd have 30 million Americans, okay? 10% of the country proficient in being able to do this skill. Just think what that does to the demand of plant food, and therefore farmers, therefore putting people back to work in rural America, growing stuff, because they'd have a big market. So if you can increase the demand side, and all of a sudden, instead of people buying and eating processed food, they're now buying ingredients to make their own food. And that doesn't mean that the fast food places are going to go away, because you don't need to eat this every day. You can have this, 70%, 80% of the time, and still go out and have a good meal at Burger King or McDonald's if you want to. That's fine. I mean, it's not for me, but I'm not going to criticize them. I'm not going to tell them what to do. So the demand that you create and the jobs that you create, this actually solves a lot of problems with the sick care system and the costs. This solves a problem with getting people who are not skilled in computers and code back to work. This gives people more confidence, more self-esteem. This creates less pressure on things like depression and all sorts of other systems, mental health. So, I mean, it's the root. It's a fundamental thing that if you could do and implement, it would dramatically change the landscape in 10 years in the country.
100%. And you know what's so frustrating, and I can only imagine it sort of frustrates you to no end as well, is that it's so obvious. You know what I mean? Let's do this and we will solve so many problems in the world. But unfortunately, greed and power kind of overtakes that, and no one wants to make these changes, eh?
Yeah, and you have a big problem with the political landscape, particularly in the US, where whatever one party does, the other one just takes the opposition, because that's just what they do. And so, you had Michelle Obama that tried to get people to, move more and eat more veggies, and, the opposition went into a complete tither that she was trying to tell people, and First Amendment and all sorts of craziness, I mean, it's just the way it's all spun. So, America is a country with lots of problems in terms of their divisiveness and the divisions. And you would think that something like this is a no-brainer. But the reality is people would view it and say, well, you're trying to, take away the McDonald's from my kids. You're taking away rights, when actually you're not. You're just trying to give more of a skill set to somebody who can actually leave and create something that's going to be good for their body, not negative. But as soon as you start down that track, you run into all sorts of resistance. It's madness.
Yeah, it is total madness. One thing for me about the film that was actually more prevalent, or most prevalent, should I say, was the teaching kids to grow the food, and then I guess as part of that was the sense of community. I mean, that was amazing, wasn't it? They were growing the food, they were getting excited about new strawberries or tomatoes or whatever, and there was that connection which was so important.
Yeah, look, as soon as you get that physical touch going on where kids are picking produce out of a farm or out of a school garden or a community garden or a home garden, and they see it travel from the garden with their hand, where they then put it in a blender, or they put it into a pan, or they toss it into a salad. That's a game changer. It's a game changer for a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old. That's creating a neural pathway for life, where food comes from. And, if you don't, we have a big problem with lots of kids not getting out amongst the dirt. They're not getting the bacteria. Yeah. They're in buildings. They're playing with electronic devices. They're watching electronic devices. They're not out there getting dirty. And so, we have the microbiome, which is a whole nother Skype call and another podcast on, which is, this bacteria, the healthy bacteria that we're not getting enough of in our bodies. And so fundamentally, it isn't rocket science. It comes back to, if we were alive 500-600 years ago, there'd be absolutely no question about the skill set that you would have to identify produce, farm it, bring it to the table, to make it a meal in your house, because there wasn't pre-made meals. We had to all do it ourselves. This is a skill that we have forgotten. Technology has come along, and through this technological advance, we have skipped steps. And when you skip steps, that's good in some respects, but there's biology. You cannot ignore the biological laws of cause and effect. You can't ignore them. They will catch up with you, and they caught up with me. And I'm living proof that I started off going down this path where it was all about wealth and not about health, and then I made a change, big change, a bunch of changes, not just all in one day, but I implemented changes over time. And now, I'm 51 years of age, and I really think that my life is not half over. I don't think I'm at halfway yet. I think that when I get to 60, I'll probably be halfway. I think there's a real possibility that I can go to 120. And I think that's not an unrealistic thing to think about in today's world. The rate of advancement of technology, the rate of advancement in understanding what our bodies can do and can't do, and ability to keep ourselves younger, longer. I think that, why do I want to be that generation that if I don't keep myself in good shape, why do I want to miss out in 15, 20 years' time when technology really comes along that can really slow down the aging process? Because that's coming. So I think that, I don't think that I'm halfway in my life yet. So having that attitude, whether that's placebo effect to living a healthy life because I have that attitude. I've read many articles and many reports about, if you aren't concerned about things, about dying, if you don't worry about it, you actually live longer. If you start worrying about it, I'm going to have a heart attack, I'm going to do this, and you stress yourself out, you actually manifest that problem. So I'm very fortunate that I got sick, because if I didn't get sick, I probably wouldn't have slowed down. And as I said in the movie, I might have had a heart attack and already be dead by now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I personally hope that you live till 120, because I think you have a great message to share, and the more people you can touch along your life, the better it's going to be. And so just before we wrap things up, we write a lot of show notes and stuff like that. But what's the future for you, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you going forward?
Well, first of all, the best way to get in touch is they can follow me on Instagram at Joe the Juicer. They can go to rebootwithjoe.com and sign up for the newsletter, and they've got a website there with lots of information. They can go to Netflix and put my name, Joe Cross, into the search bar, or see my movies that'll come up. I've made 3, and I'm also in another half a dozen films as a guest. So that's how they can find me. I'm on Twitter as well, and Facebook, and all those platforms. What's coming up? Look, I continue to just research, and do all sorts of crazy things to my body to see what happens if I do this, and what if I do that, and what if I try the ketogenic diet, what if I try water fasting, what if I try this, and What if I change the time restricted feeding? So I'm continuing to explore and really enjoying learning and studying and really just getting my knowledge base up. We have some exciting things happening at the company this year. We have some exciting content to come out. We were working on a fourth film, but we've got to get the funding for that now. So we're still working on the funding. So we may do a crowdsource or we may not. That's still debating that. We have a good plan for a podcast later in the year. We're still just trying to work out. I didn't want to do a podcast for the sake of doing one. I wanted to wait till we had a really good idea and a really good sort of thinking and a team around putting my podcast together. I'd like my podcast to be like my films at that sort of level. So it's, I could do this, which I love doing, which is just the one-on-one talks. But I sort of felt that for what we want to do and where we want to go, I think it's going to be a little bit more sort of narrative and storytelling over an episode with lots of different people sharing opinions and advice. So whether that comes to fruition or not, I'm working hard on it. So we'll see if it's a 2018 thing or if it's an early 2019 release. And then I'm working with some guys, a great bunch of people that we're looking at coming up with lots of different sort of products that can help people, get. There's an enormous amount of people that just don't understand. Like I've got my my vitamin D. My vitamin D is here, and I get my bloods checked every 6 months, and vitamin D for me is low. So even though I'm in the sun a lot, there's a lot of people that don't really understand that there are certain supplements that they really should be taking. Not, what's good for me, Craig, isn't necessarily good for Gareth or good for you or whatever. Like it's all different. But I really want to try and help people understand, there's probably 20 things that everyone could at least need 3 or 4 of, like in a big parcel. So I want to try and put those programs together, and I want to create content that can educate people about those. I mean, why do you need vitamin D? Let's take a deep dive and really look. Are you someone that needs vitamin D? And what happens if you don't have it? Like, where does this go? And 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 what's and then giving them a story of that, I think is important. So I haven't seen many people do that, and if they have, I think I can do it a little bit differently and a bit more fun. So that's the kind of stuff that we're working on. I'm very fortunate to be in Australia for a couple of months while I plan and be quite creative. I don't have anything to market or sell right now, which is a good thing. And so I'm happy just to be in Australia, but I'll be heading back up to the Northern Hemisphere in a couple of months. As soon as it gets a little chilly down here, I'll head north for the sun.
Well, Joe, that's exciting times. That's for sure. I mean, I must say, I can totally relate why you've done so well. Is you're a really personable kind of guy, and and I think that's a lot of value in that. That people just get on with you, just a genuine guy, and it makes it very easy to listen to you. So keep up the good work, because I think a lot of people will listen to someone that they can relate to so well, so we're very grateful for that. Have you got any plans to do some talks in Oz in the coming months or weeks, or can we all find that on your website?
Yeah, I am actually talking I am speaking in Adelaide in March, and I think it's the 27th of March, and I'm in Adelaide on the 27th of March. I'll be posting that on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. It's on my Facebook page now. But yeah, so I'm doing a 2 or 3 hour event in Adelaide, which will be fun. I haven't really got other stuff planned because I'm kind of in this creative mode of just getting stuff done. So I kind of, I will be definitely on tour in the US in the fourth quarter, and I've got a big tour planned for the US and Canada in 2019. I'll be on the road for probably half the year. So I've got a lot coming up, but right now I'm just enjoying my vitamin D out here under the sun in Australia, and I'm enjoying spending time with my family. My brothers, sisters, and my parents. It's just nice because on the road it's a pretty lonely sort of existence. So it's just nice to be down here with good mates and friends that have known me for a long time, and so you sort of soak all that good vibe up and good energy to take with me when I get on the road.
Yeah, that's That's super cool, man. I just want to end it off by saying thank you. Like, first of all, it's just so cool to have you on the podcast, and like I said, I still kind of feel a little bit starstruck, which is so cool. You've brought just some like amazing energy to this chat, and just through being so open and honest and telling your story over the last sort of 10, 12 years, you've influenced so many people in like such a positive way, and you keep on providing and you keep on educating. And I really encourage people to go and watch your documentaries, because it will change their perspective and outlook on things if they're not sort of healthy already. And we just want to wish you like all the best going forward, and we're just super excited, for you and for the future. And I just know, like, Joe at 120 years old is going to have like the biggest funeral, because he's touched so many people's lives, you know what I mean? And that's super cool, man. So just
well, that's very kind.
Yeah,
that's very kind of you guys to say. I appreciate that very much, boys. Been great. I've enjoyed our chat. It's been fantastic. And of course, all the people out there and listeners out there, of course, I want to sign off with a big juice on.
That's cool. Yeah. And the thing is, like, there's actually so much we wanted to chat to you about, you know what I mean? And like, hopefully one day in the future we get to meet you in person, and we can carry this on.
We can come back later in the year. Might be good towards the end of the year and do a round 2.
Yeah, that'd be
great.
awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. That was really great. Thank you once again. And I don't know, I'm starting to sweat here on the Goldie. I don't know how you're feeling down there. I'm like...
You're on the Gold Coast. Yeah, it's a bit humid down at Palm Beach, but I might go outside for a bit of a walk now that I've been sitting down for the best part of an hour and a half, 2 hours. I usually walk around when I'm on calls.
Oh, do you? Oh, thanks for...
Well, thanks so much. We had a great chat with you, man.
Thanks, guys.
So...